Welcome everyone to another episode of La Cosecha Media Lounge powered by Summit K-12. I'm your host, Andrea Cano, and on today's episode we have Dr. Ester de Jong. Thank you so much for being here today. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey, who you are, what do you love about what you do?
Oh my, that's a loaded question. Let's start there.
We have time today.
Oh, there we go. Now we can relax. You know, I was born in the Netherlands and grew up in a place where there was a very small town. And I don't think I was aware of language issues at all till I went to the university and realized, oh, the way that I speak Dutch is very different than the people, how they speak Dutch in the southern part of the Netherlands. And so that really increased my awareness about how languages are different and how we treat those different varieties differently. And as part of my studies, I realized I needed to extend that to immigrant languages. In the Netherlands, we have particularly Turkish and Moroccan students who learn Dutch as their second language. And I realized we really value multilingualism in Europe in general, but we don't really do that for these students. And so that really got me interested in issues of equity, understanding how important it is to be multilingual, how important being able to use your languages in school and everywhere else, how important it is for who you are. And that if we want children to succeed, all children to succeed, our school systems need to be responsive to that. So that's really where my passion comes from in terms of really supporting bilingual education now that I work here in the United States.
So you mentioned something about the dialect being a little bit different from your town versus other towns. Is it similar, like in Texas, we say y'all and we say things like that. And also I know in Spanish, being a bilingual teacher, I remember hearing, and we hear all the time, well, that's not proper Spanish, or you're not saying it. Is that something that you experienced? And is that similar to what you hear?
Yeah, so we have, standard Dutch, and then there's the dialect regional variety Dutch. And that was definitely it's what you speak at home.
Yes, okay.
But it's not proper Dutch. And I just didn't realize that was the case. I mean, I knew my parents. My mother grew up in a different area. And so I knew my grandparents spoke a different variety. That's how we grew up. But then I didn't realize that when I went to the southern part, one of the big differences, for example, is in the northern part, we say above the rivers. We pronounce things with a much harder G sound, like a sound. Once you going south, that becomes a yeah. I was like, oh, that's really beautiful, mind you, but very different. And so I stood out when I was studying in the southern part of the Netherlands, I stood out in a way that was very different from before. So yeah.
That's interesting, because I would have never thought, I know in Spanish it exists because I've taught in it, I've heard it, but I didn't think it existed in other places. So thank you. Now I know.
This is a worldwide phenomenon everywhere. Yes.
That's very interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about your work and what you're presenting on here at La Cosecha?
So my work is in kind of two areas, if you will. So one of my passions is in two-way dual language bilingual education as a model where we can bring everybody together and support the goals of bilingualism and biliteracy and academic achievement and social cultural competence. Because I think in this world that is so diverse, it's an amazing space to learn how to be with people who are different and learn how to negotiate that in respectful and productive ways. So that's one area of my expertise. I worked in those programs. Then another area is teacher preparation. And particularly thinking about how do we prepare non-specialist teachers, general education teachers who are also working for most of the day with bilingual learners. How do we prepare them to be effective with this group of students? And then my third little tiny piece is in the area of language policy. So how do we formulate policy, but also how do we get these policies implemented, right, at different levels?
So you talked about a two-way dual language. I was a two-way dual language teacher, 50-50. Is that what you're seeing? Is it 50-50, or is it just depending on the district and the schools you've worked with, what it looks like in their classrooms?
Yeah, so I think you see a range. I think 50-50 is pretty popular because in some ways it's easier to implement.
In Texas, it's very easy.
It's also sometimes easier to convince people to come into the program because some people might be worried if you had a 90-10 model where you really start with Spanish first, and that may make some parents worried. They don't have to, because the research shows that these programs are very effective. But you know, you have to kind of, some districts have to kind of balance getting the parents into the program, and so
And do you
yeah.
do some parent education? Because I know when I was in the classroom, I always talked to the parents when they would bring in their students and they were learning Spanish. I would always say it's a family commitment. It's not just a student commitment. You're not just sending your kid here and we're going to teach them. It truly is a family commitment, and going outside of this classroom and bringing the culture to your home. Is that something that you also touch on?
Yeah, it's when I was in the district administrator, we did a lot of working with the parents and helping them understand how the program worked.
Yeah.
And part of it is particularly, for example, for parents who may be monolingual English speakers, that they understand, A, this is a long-term commitment, and B, yes, your child will come home saying, "Mommy, I didn't understand anything that was happening." Ah! And the response of the parent is really important at that point, right? And so, and we talk with the parents about, so if you at that point say, "Oh, poor baby, we're going to pull you out of the program," that's one reaction, to kind of say, "You know what, you can do this, it will be okay," right? And think about how other people who don't speak English as their home language, how they might feel, right? And so it's that empathy building. So parents are hugely important, and figuring out ways, particularly in a two-way program, if you have very distinct parent groups, how do you bring them together too? And I think that's another area that we need to really be thinking about.
Yes, and you talked about teacher preparation. What is a little bit of that you can tell us that you do in that work of teacher preparation?
Yeah, so depending on kind of where you are as a teacher education program, what we're finding is that most of our teachers tend to be white, female, monolingual, and have had limited experience just being with other languages and other cultures. And so if that's your student profile, and that's not happening everywhere, but if that's the profile in your teacher preparation program, we have a huge task in terms of building awareness, building empathy, providing them with the experiences that helps them understand what it means to be a second language learner, but also help them understand why in their role it's so important for them to advocate for equity. And understand that if we do practices that are designed based with kind of monolingual kids in mind, that oftentimes those practices will not be good enough for bilingual learners. And so we really need to help them both understand that, but then also give them the skill sets to be able to say, okay, this is what I need to do differently. And how to really work with, right now, big topic, newcomers. Right? It's like, they don't speak any English. I'm like, that's okay. You have strategies to help make your instruction more comprehensible. You do not have to put them in the corner with a little worksheet of coloring till they've learned enough English with the ESL teacher, right? So that kind of embracing, like, you are a teacher for all students, not just some students. And we're a team effort. So you work with the second language teacher, you work with the bilingual teacher, you work with the paraprofessional. It's a team that really makes sure that everybody's working for all kids, not just some kids.
It definitely takes a team. It's not just one or two. It can't just be the classroom teacher. It has to be the entire community within the school system to help have a successful program. And then at the end of the day, I think all educators have the same goal. We want our students to be successful, and we have to do certain things to do that. So my last question for you today is, and it's an easy one, is why do you love La Cosecha? What's your favorite thing about La Cosecha?
My favorite thing about La Cosecha, where to start? You've been walking around a little bit here,
Yeah.
right?
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. I think if you just feel the energy that's here, I think one of the things that La Cosecha does is that the people who are here already have an understanding of why dual language is so important. They have a starting point as to what they do. And so for me, this conference is both like, it's a little bit of a homecoming, right? You don't have to defend dual language because people know why dual language is so essential, especially right now. But then it also allows us to dig deeper. It's like, how can we get even better? What practices can we share? What is our next step in terms of what we need to do? And that's a conversation that can happen here. Whereas at other conferences, to be honest, you keep having why do we need to do bilingual education? And then you kind of stop. It's like, well, I already knew that. So I've not learned much. Right. So this is a tremendous learning opportunity. And the way that the conference is organized is just really sensitive to what teachers need to know, what leaders need to know, and now also what researchers need to be able to do, which is one of the things I'll be working on at this particular convention.
And you said it so beautifully is that there are so many great conferences that we attend that we get the privilege to go to. And there is a lot of education of what is bilingualism or what is bilingual education. And I do get the sense here is we get to dig really deep here because we've already scratched the surface. We're going deeper here. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Oh, I think that's really
Thank
key
you.
to hear.
Yes. No, thank you so much for being here and sharing your great work. Thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of La Cosecha Media Lounge. Thank you to our special guest for being here today. And remember, keep learning, stay curious y hasta la próxima, disfruta el viaje.